often would you say a screenwriter's first draft is their final draft?
Never. But it brings up, I think, an important point, which is that the tendency for many writers is to think that because writing is rewriting, it's a classic phrase that everybody says, they take the approach that go ahead and write the first draft, make mistakes, feel free to make mistakes, because you can fix it later. This is a very dangerous approach, and one that seems to be a good idea at the time, but is actually the makings of a disaster. And the reason for that is that it means that the writer is not doing their structural work up front, their preparation. In any craft, before you actually execute that art form, you need to do the prep work up front. In story, it is figuring out the structure. This is why I was talking about on a television staff, you don't get to write the first draft of the script until every story beat is figured out in minute detail, and the showrunner signs off on that. That's because they know on television from experience, working under tremendous time pressure, that a lot of times, most of the time, it doesn't get fixed in rewrite. Whatever big structural mistakes you make in the opening draft are then much more difficult to fix. And I use the metaphor of concrete. When you write that first draft of the script, that script, that story hardens into concrete in your mind. And now it's much more difficult to go back into it, break up that concrete, and make the kind of major structural fixes that will give you a better script. That's the kind of work you want to do before you write it as a script. And that's why I put so much emphasis on doing your character work, doing your plot work, especially emphasizing the 22 building blocks, because that gives you the sequence of your story before you write it into a script. And one last point about this, when I do story consulting, I would much prefer that someone not send me the screenplay, that they send me the scene list, the sequence essentially of the 3x5 cards, because I can much more quickly figure out what's wrong with the story when it's simply in the scene list than I can when it's embedded in that concrete in the actual script, and there's all this undergrowth, this brush that is hiding what's really wrong in all this dialogue. I don't need the dialogue. I just need to know the story. Everything comes from making that story work, and that you've got to figure out up front before it goes to script.